My name's Ethan, and for 5 years, I believed I was a happily married man. At least, that's what I told myself. My wife, Hannah, and I had what most people would consider a stable, healthy relationship. We didn't have major blowouts, we supported each other, and for the most part, life felt steady, comfortable, even. That's what marriage is supposed to be, right? A partnership where you grow together, build a life, and trust that no matter what happens, you've got each other's back. But lately, something had felt off. First, I didn't even notice. It was subtle, the kind of thing you could easily blame on stress, a rough week, or just one of those phases where things feel a little off-kilter. But as time passed, those tiny changes became impossible to ignore. Hannah had always been an affectionate woman. Back in the day, whenever I walked through the front door after work, she'd greet me with a warm hug, sometimes even pull me in for a long, lingering kiss, like she genuinely missed me. But now, the kisses were barely there. Just a quick peck, the kind you'd give a distant relative out of obligation. Our conversations, once so effortless, had turned into something mechanical. We used to talk about everything, but now she barely engaged. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give me short, clipped answers. The warmth in her voice? Gone. The teasing, the playful banter, the laughter? Disappeared. It felt less like we were a married couple and more like we were just two people coexisting under the same roof. And then there were the mood swings. One moment, she'd be distant, lost in thought. The next, she'd snap at me over the smallest things. Every time I asked if something was wrong, if she was okay, she'd brush me off with the same flat response. I'm fine, Ethan. But I knew she wasn't. The more I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking it, the more it gnawed at me. I found myself thinking back to the early days of our marriage when everything felt effortless. We could talk for hours without even realizing it. We'd lie in bed, wrapped up in each other, whispering about our future. We were a team, but now, it felt like she was slipping away, little by little, like the tide pulling back from the shore. So I tried harder. I planned date nights. I checked in on her more often, asked how she was feeling. I even went out of my way to do small things around the house that I knew she appreciated, just to see if it would get any kind of reaction. But nothing changed. One night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the silence between us. It had been months since we'd been intimate. I couldn't understand why. I spent hours reading online about how to reconnect with a distant spouse, skimming through relationship advice threads, and those so-called save your marriage forums filled with men who sounded just as lost as I felt. One thing kept coming up: intimacy. Apparently, physical touch was supposed to rekindle emotional closeness. And when I thought about it, it made sense. Hannah and I had barely touched each other lately. No warm hugs, no playful teasing, just those empty, half-hearted kisses that felt more like an afterthought than a real expression of love. And even those were becoming rare. So I decided to start small. I reached out and gently took her hand. Just a simple gesture. Nothing pushy. The second my fingers brushed hers, she flinched and pulled away like I'd burned her. Just leave me alone. Her voice was cold, sharp. I turned onto my side, trying to keep my frustration in check. Hannah, talk to me? I said softly, choosing my words carefully. What's wrong? Did I do something? She didn't move, didn't even look at me. She just lay there, rigid, like she was waiting for me to give up and stop asking. Desperate for any kind of connection, I reached out again, just placed my hand gently on her shoulder, hoping she'd say something, anything, that would make this moment feel less like a nightmare. And then she snapped. She whipped around, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Don't touch me. I can't stand you. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My whole body tensed like I'd just been physically struck. I searched her face, hoping, praying, for some sign that she didn't mean it, that it was just frustration talking. But there was nothing, just cold, detached disgust. I didn't even know how to respond. My mind just shut down. I rolled onto my back, staring blankly at the ceiling, completely numb. And for the first time since we got married, I wasn't sure if this was something we could ever fix. I stopped asking questions. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I already knew I wasn't going to get them. It felt like I had been demoted from husband to roommate, nothing more than a man she used to love. So, instead of asking, I started watching. In the days that followed, I paid attention to the little details. Hannah had started falling asleep in random places, dozing off at the dining table, her head resting on her folded arms while her laptop sat open in front of her. Once, I found her passed out on the couch in the middle of the afternoon, her phone still clutched in her hand, the screen dimmed from inactivity. That wasn't like her. Hannah had never been the type to just crash anywhere like that. Then there were the mornings. She always looked exhausted, no matter how much sleep she got. And sometimes, she'd rush straight to the bathroom the moment she woke up. I'd hear the toilet flush minutes later, like she'd been sick, like she had thrown up. And then there was the most concerning part. She was leaving the house more often. Hannah had never been secretive before. If she had an errand to run, she'd tell me. If she was meeting friends, she'd mention who she was with and where she was going. But lately, she would just disappear. I'd come home from work, and she wouldn't be there, and I had no idea where she was going. No text, no note, nothing. Then, hours later, she'd just waltz back in like she hadn't been gone all day. If I asked where she'd been, she'd dodge the question, acting like I was crazy for even asking. I thought about following her myself, trying to get some answers, but deep down, I knew I wouldn't do it right. I didn't trust myself to be subtle, to keep my emotions in check. So instead, I did the next best thing. I hired a private investigator. Took a week. "We have confirmation," the investigator told me. And just like that, everything clicked into place. Hannah was seeing someone else. That was it. That was the answer I had been searching for. That was why she couldn't look me in the eye anymore, why she recoiled from my touch, why she had shut me out completely. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have thrown the evidence in her face, demanded an explanation, forced her to admit the truth while she squirmed under the weight of her own betrayal. But I didn't, because in that moment, I realized something even bigger. She had already made her choice. She had already decided I wasn't enough. And I wasn't about to beg a woman to love me when she had already handed that love to someone else. No, she didn't deserve a fight. She deserved to be blindsided. Right then and there, I made my decision. I was going to divorce her, and I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. The house was quiet when I walked in one evening. I had left work early, determined to track down a document my lawyer had been asking for. It was something I needed for the divorce process, and I had been putting off looking for it. I went straight to our bedroom, heading for my side of the closet where I kept all my important paperwork. I started digging through the shelves, flipping through folders, checking between stacks of old receipts and bank statements. Nothing. Frustrated, I let out a deep sigh, rubbing a hand down my face. Maybe I had left it somewhere else. Then, a thought struck me. What if Hannah had accidentally put it with her things? It wouldn't be the first time something of mine ended up on her side of the closet. Without thinking much of it, I turned toward her section, casually rifling through her things. And that's when I found it, tucked inside a plain white envelope. Pregnancy scan. For a few seconds, my brain refused to process what I was looking at. My hands trembled as I pulled the paper out, scanning the details. Over a month along, my heartbeat slammed against my ribs. She never told me. I scanned the date on the ultrasound, my mind racing, running through the timeline, piecing everything together. Was this why she had been so distant? Was this why she had snapped at me that night in bed? Why she had looked at me like I was a stranger she couldn't stand? And then, an even more terrifying thought burrowed into my brain. Could it even be mine? This couldn't wait. I couldn't sit on this information, couldn't pretend I didn't know. I needed answers. Now, the rest of the evening passed in a blur. I sat there, gripping the ultrasound, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling into something darker than anger. Then, I heard the sound of keys rattling at the door. Hannah stepped inside, completely unaware of the storm waiting for her. Her phone was in one hand, her thumb scrolling mindlessly as she barely glanced up. I didn't let her settle in. "How long have you known you were pregnant?" The words shot out of my mouth before I even thought about softening them. Hannah froze mid-step. Her entire body went rigid. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Silence stretched between us. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. I was going to tell you. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Going to tell me? I repeated, standing up from the couch, my whole body tight with tension. Why the hell would you need time to prepare to tell your husband he's going to be a father? Or, is the baby not mine? The second those words left my mouth, I saw it. That split-second hesitation. Hannah forced herself to recover, straightening her posture, blurting out the words too quickly. Of course it's yours. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. I took a step closer, my voice low and firm. We'll do a DNA test. She broke, let out a choked, broken sob. I don't know who the father is. I felt the words in my bones. This wasn't just a confession. This was a death sentence for everything we had built together. For months I had felt something was wrong. I had questioned my own sanity, wondering if I was imagining things, if I was being paranoid. But this was the confirmation I never wanted. I exhaled slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady. Get ready. The divorce papers will be finalized soon. Hannah dropped to her knees, sobbing. She begged me to reconsider, pleaded with me not to rush into this, swore she could explain. I didn't care anymore. There was nothing left to explain. Hannah didn't cry for long. Once she realized I wasn't budging, she got angry. She fought. She dragged the divorce out, turned it into a drawn-out war, making everything as painful as possible. She wanted the house. She wanted spousal support. She argued that 5 years of marriage meant she deserved something. I let my lawyer handle it. I didn't argue. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Then came the DNA test. When the results came back proving the baby wasn't mine, Hannah shut down. No more fake justifications. No more fights over assets. She had nothing left to stand on. The court sided with me. She walked away with nothing significant. I don't regret leaving. Not for a second. If I had stayed, if I had let her manipulate me, I would have spent my life raising another man's child, trapped in a lie I never asked for. By the time the divorce was finalized, I had already checked out emotionally. The fights, the deception, the endless legal battles, it drained me. It wasn't until months later that I finally learned the full story of Hannah's affair. Through mutual friends, through bits and pieces that surfaced during court proceedings, I pieced together the truth. When Hannah found out she was pregnant, she went straight to the man she had risked everything for. She expected him to step up. She thought he'd prove she hadn't thrown her marriage away for nothing. Maybe, deep down, she hoped he'd tell her they could be a real family, that he'd be the one to take care of her now that she had burned her bridges with me. But reality hit her hard. Her lover didn't want the baby. He told her straight up, get rid of it. He wasn't ready for a kid. He didn't want the responsibility. He had no intention of rearranging his life for her. Hannah was blindsided. She had convinced herself that leaving me meant she was stepping into something better. She thought she was walking into a brand new life where she'd finally be happy. But instead, she realized she had destroyed everything. For nothing. And that's when she snapped. Instead of holding herself accountable for her choices, instead of facing the fact that she had made the biggest mistake of her life, she let that anger fester. And when it got too heavy to carry, she turned it on me. That's why she became distant. That's why she couldn't look me in the eye. That's why she told me she couldn't stand me. It was never about me. She was furious with herself. Mad that she had gambled on the wrong man. Mad that she had thrown away a stable, committed husband for someone who tossed her aside the moment things got real. And me? I was just the easiest target for all that bitterness, regret, and self-hatred. She wasn't disgusted by me. She was disgusted by herself. But by the time I figured that out, it didn't matter anymore. I had already walked away, and I'm grateful for that, because if I hadn't paid attention, if I had ignored the signs, I could have ended up raising another man's child right now. That's the reality. Some men don't want to see it. They push that gut feeling aside when something feels off. They tell themselves their wife or girlfriend is just going through a rough patch, that she'll snap out of it, that things will go back to normal. But let me tell you something, if someone doesn't want you, you'll feel it. I felt it. And I'm damn glad I listened. Because at the end of the day, it's better to be divorced than to be trapped in a lie, raising a child born from betrayal. That's my truth. That's my lesson. And if you've made it this far into the story, I want to hear from you. Would you have handled it differently? Would you have forgiven her? Or would you have done exactly what I did, walk away, knowing you deserve better? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you found this story worth sharing, hit that like button, subscribe, and send it to someone who might need to hear this today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like.